All right, I am seeing some people coming in, so welcome to everyone who is. We're going to give it just a few minutes to let folks get in, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, looks like the stream of folks coming in is slowing down, so I think go ahead and get started with some introductions and everything. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third virtual event and fourth event overall of the Plant-Based Challenge. Really excited to see you here on this Wednesday. We've had beautiful weather this week and hopefully that will continue throughout the week. So we have a great pizza party on Friday. This is part of our A2ZERO Plant-Based Challenge. This was a project that was put together by a group of our ambassadors, including Gaia Kyle and Avni Rao, who are on the call today, as well as a few others who I think are in the audience. They, after completing their 12-week training course of their learning about sustainability topics, so that they can go out into their communities and really advocate for what we're doing with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations here and our A2ZERO plan for carbon neutrality by 2030. At the end of that, they get to choose a project that they want to work on, and these lovely folks decided they wanted to put together a plant-based challenge. So it was really their brainchild. We here at OSI have been helping them out logistically, and we had a lot of help from VegMichigan as well, but the A2ZERO ambassadors really deserve a lot of the credit, most of the credit for what's going on. So I will go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. For the Q&A that we're going to have at the end of tonight's presentations. We're going to have two presentations and then we'll do the Q&A after both. You should have a little Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, has a couple of little speech blurb bubbles on there. Just click on that and you can type in your question. It'll show up for us. And at the end of the session, I'll be able to read those off and get answers to them from our speakers. You can also ask your question out loud if you would prefer to do that. At the end, when we're doing the Q&A session, just click on the little button down there that says raise hand with a little hand like this. And I will see that you have your hand raised. I'll be able to unmute you so that you can ask your question. So those are our two ways that you can ask questions during the Q&A session. And I think that is really it. Oh, we are also recording this. So if you aren't able to watch the whole thing, then there will be a YouTube video up on it on our YouTube channel a little bit later, probably next week sometime. So you'll be able to come back and watch the rest of it if you can't stay the whole time. And I think that is it. So with that, I will turn it over to Gaia to do an introduction of our speakers for tonight.
Wait, sorry, I wanted to cut in.
Oh.
I have one more little housekeeping thing to add. Thank you, Sean. Sorry for cutting in, Gaia. I want to remind everyone that throughout the whole week, we're doing a bingo card challenge where you can you can find 3 levels of bingo cards on the website and at a2gov.org/plant challenge, and you can download a beginner, intermediate, or advanced bingo card, and you can complete however many bingos you want on your respective category, and you can email it to us at plant-based challenge at a2gov.org, and you can see this email will you'll find it in your weekly emails. And if you email us your completed card, you get put into a raffle to earn some gift cards to various local restaurants that have a lot of plant-based offerings. So please fill that out and look forward to that. And with that, I will turn it over to Gaia.
Thanks, Ebony. I knew I was forgetting something. You'd think at this point I'd have it all memorized, but I always forget at least one of those things.
Many things to remember. All right, thanks everyone. So I'm Gaia Kyle. I'm one of the A2ZERO ambassadors, the community volunteers working with the city's climate mitigation program. As a nurse practitioner, I'm working in the area of lifestyle medicine. Tonight's presentations are near and dear to my heart. We have 2 presentations scheduled. The first presentation by Dr. Melissa Sundermann is titled, Where do you get your protein and other myths about plant-based diets? Then we have Dr. Bob Breakey, who will be sharing on preventing and reversing disease with plant-based nutrition. I've gotten to know both of our speakers through our mutual involvement in Washtenaw Optimal Wellness, a group focused on community action to support health promotion behaviors. So anyhow, without further ado, let me start by introducing our first speaker, Dr. Melissa Sundermann. Dr. Sundermann is a physician with 25 years of clinical practice. She got her medical degree from MSU College of Osteopathic Medicine. She's board certified through the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. And she started a Facebook website that I'd invite people to check out if you haven't already, Lifestyle Medicine of Washtenaw and Livingston County, with I think it's over 2,000 people, and whatever you call it, people who have joined.
Members.
Members, yes, thank you. And she's presented at national conferences. She's been featured in articles and podcasts on plant-based nutrition. But in addition to being an advocate of plant-based nutrition, she's also an endurance athlete, having completed 3 full Ironman triathlons and having run the Boston Marathon not once, but 10 times. She's currently works at the William Folletti Lifestyle Medicine Institute at IHA, but she's about to start her new position, which is very exciting, as a physician at the world-renowned wellness resort Canyon Ranch in Massachusetts. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Sundermann.
Thanks, Gaia. Thanks for the kind introduction. And with that, I'm going to start with my presentation, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague and close friend, Bob Breakey. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll hope that this all works out. Okay, so let me know if you end up seeing that.
Yep.
Okay, so as Gaia introduced me and said that I am a lifestyle medicine physician, that is absolutely true. I'm board certified in both internal medicine and lifestyle medicine. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with lifestyle medicine is an evidence-based, research-backed approach to medicine that really looks at not only prevention of chronic disease, but also reversal of chronic disease. And Dr. Breakey will get more into that. But we have 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine that we strongly believe that encompasses wellness. And that is food is medicine, and that's what we'll be talking about mostly tonight. The role of movement, the role of sleep, avoiding risky behaviors such as tobacco, excessive alcohol, and drug use, stress management, managing all of the stress in our life, or learning ways to better handle that, and social connection. And then everyone knows who knows me, I also put on a 7th pillar, and that is daily exposure to nature. But what we're going to talk about with my brief little presentation is myths of plant-based dietary patterns. And under the nutrition pillar of lifestyle medicine, we do, let's see if I can forward this. We do advocate for a whole food, plant-based dietary pattern. So that's what our goal is. I also use the terms plant slant, plant strong, plant forward, but that's really what we're aiming to do. And I know that this closely aligns to what this week is all about for Ann Arbor and sustainability. So we're going to highlight some myths, and I hear this every single day in my office. I see patients in the office 5 days a week. I'm always trying to educate them about the benefits of a plant-based dietary pattern. And for a lot of my patients, that's something foreign to them. Even though they're familiar with fruits and vegetables, when you throw out the term vegan or you throw out the term plant-based, people are like, whoa. I mean, some people are like, hey, that's really cool. Like, I already do that. But for the majority of my patients, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. So we're going to go through some myths that maybe you've heard, maybe some family members have said, and hopefully we'll clarify some of these myths. So one of the myths I often hear is way too expensive. I can't afford to do plant-based, because I think they think of whole foods. And I say, no, you don't have to go to whole paycheck, to be plant-based. Actually, being plant-based can be more affordable than being an omnivore. And so if we look at vegan on a budget, and this is what commonly is found in my cupboards and in my refrigerators, and is really some staples of a plant-based dietary pattern. We start up top in bananas, 19 cents a pound. Pasta, if we're getting whole grain pasta, great places to shop for budget. Or I love Trader Joe's. I love Aldi too. Aldi has a lot of great organic produce, great prices on other goods. So pasta, get some whole grain pasta for, $1. Potatoes, sweet potatoes are a daily on my daily menu. And my sweet potatoes, I think right now I get for about 89 cents a pound, 99 cents a pound. Beans, you can get the dry beans, which for a bag of beans, looking at $2. You do have to hydrate them. So in my case of working full time and having kind of a busy life, I tend to be a little cutting corners. So I will get the canned beans and just make sure I rinse them out just to get rid of the extra sodium. And my canned beans are about 99 cents a can. We're looking at carrots, again, very affordable, even pasta sauce if you don't have time to make your own. Again, that's me, very affordable, and lettuce. And tomatoes, especially when we have farmers markets. And, in Ann Arbor, we are blessed to have a wonderful farmers market on Saturdays and Wednesdays. The Saturdays does run all year round, where you can get fresh produce and farm stands all around. Our almond milk or soy milk, again, a carton of almond milk, we're looking at, $2 to $3 for a container. Tofu, this is on my daily, or not my daily, my shopping list every time I go to the grocery. Even at Kroger's, you can get organic tofu. My block of tofu is usually about $1.99, and that's organic. Breads, if you do get the A2ZERO sprouted bread, that can be a little bit more expensive. I'm running about like $5 a loaf, but so worth it. Lentils, again, very affordable. Steel cut oats, really, really affordable. Oranges. So here are examples of really, these things are not expensive. And you absolutely, if you like Whole Foods, go there. Absolutely. But I do most of my shopping at Trader Joe's and Aldi, and even Kroger. They have decent organic produce. And then they have, they're simply organic brands. So you can find good stuff all over the place. So if we look at the cost of a meal with omnivore, so eating meat or the standard American diet versus don't eat meat, the cost of one meal is actually a little bit cheaper if you don't eat meat. And then if you add that up weekly, so the cost of one meal times 7 days of meals, we're looking at $125 per week if you eat meat, and $102 if you don't eat meat. So it's a common, myth. Nearly 1 in 4 people who consume meat didn't think plant-based diets were budget friendly. But it shows that, vegans and vegetarians spend about $23 less per week than people who eat meat. So, again, shop around, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that a block of tofu is a lot cheaper than your cut of salmon or your filet. So myth number 2, eating out options are slim. A lot of my patients are like, but I'm never going to be able to go out to eat again. Like, my friends are going out and there's going to be nothing on the menu except a head of lettuce. And absolutely not true. And I'm going to give you a great resource that you can go on the internet for, and it's actually an app too. So if you look at this graph, this represents Europe, but I have to believe this is very similar trend in the United States as well. If we look at vegan and vegetarian options at eating out in restaurants, with vegan being in blue and vegetarian being in orange, if we look at this trend from 2007 to 2019, and we know that's even exploded more leading up to 2022 and the plant-based options, we're seeing tremendous growth. And I think, even though some of these might not be healthy, because we're starting to see, plant-based burgers at some of the fast food chains. But again, if we're looking at environmental and friendly to the animals, transition foods like that are great. When Bob and I are talking to from a health standpoint, some of those transition foods, Impossible Burgers and things like that, probably aren't the best for your health, but again, better in some cases, or can be better in some cases for health, and definitely better for the planetary health and for animals. So this is really encouraging to see that the offerings are increasing exponentially. So this is a godsend. I had the opportunity this summer to travel abroad. My son was studying abroad in Italy, and we did some travel with him afterwards. And I have this on my phone, whatever city I was in, whatever country I was in across the globe, I just pull up, whatever city I'm in, and I get a listing. This is what it looks like on the internet, but then you have an app on your phone, and this is like for Ann Arbor. These were some options that have vegan options, and they get star reviews. People will write in reviews. You can check out their menu. And it's just a really good thing that I still do if I'm meeting up with people and I'm going to a new restaurant. Like this weekend, I'm going to be speaking at a conference in Boston. So I'll pull up Happy Cow, and that way I kind of know the lay of the land, and I know where I can go to get some plant-based options, so that before I go to the restaurant, I'm not sort of scurrying around trying to find something plant-based. That being said, it's so possible to veganize or plant-based a lot of restaurant meals. If it's an Italian restaurant and they serve pasta, instead of having the meatballs on it, you can just ask for pasta with marinara and vegetables, so pasta primavera. At even a steakhouse, get the sides. You can get the baked potato, you can get the side of vegetables, steamed broccoli, steamed asparagus. If you're at an Asian restaurant, again, stir fries with vegetables and tofu. A lot of restaurants now, we joke because if you order a salad, they say, do you want protein with that? And traditionally it's, protein is considered animal protein, right? So do you want salmon, chicken, or steak on it? And I'm starting to see restaurants that actually will put tofu as a side. So that's really great to see that is being considered a plant or a protein. So a lot of these restaurants, or even, Qdoba and Mexican restaurants, you can have the burrito, just say, can I just have a bean burrito? So if you really think about it, it might not be right on the menu, but a lot of places are able to make your meal plant-based. A lot of people are offering plant-based burgers, Impossible Burgers, black bean burgers. If they offer either Impossible Burger or black bean burger, I tend to go with the black bean burger. I think it's a little bit healthier from a health standpoint. All right, myth number 3. This is a big one. You can't build muscle on plant-based dietary patterns. Where do you get your protein? That is probably, and Bob will probably, say, yep, that's what we hear all the time. I can't do plant-based because I need my protein. So we will talk about how much protein we really need. And yes, you can get protein through plants. So if you look at this graph here, that's looking at omnivores. So that's, you eat everything, right? So all kind of animal products and dairy. Flexitarians are like, I have vegetables, but sometimes I have some chicken. Pescatarians, no red meat per se, but it includes fish. Vegetarians, meaning no animals other than dairy, right? So cheese and milk products, and then eggs as well. And then vegan or plant-based is how we'll describe it. And that's whole food plant-based. So no dairy, no eggs, nothing with eyes. But really, when I talk to patients, I say, in 25 years of clinical practice, the only time I've seen protein deficient patients is when I was a hospitalist and someone was at end stage COPD or was cachectic from just being really, really sick. But in my daily practice, I really don't see protein deficient patients. I see fiber deficient patients, but I don't see protein. And the calculation that really seems to fit is we need about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram. So doing the math, if you know what you weigh in pounds divided by 2.2, multiply that times 0.8. Now, roughly for the average male, it's about 56 grams per day, and females about 46 grams. Now, certainly if you're very active, like I'm training for a marathon right now, I'm going to need more than that. So you could bump that up to 1.0 or 1.2. If you are an Olympian, probably 1.5. But again, when you look at some of the articles about protein, they'll pump those numbers way up, and that's not good for our kidneys to have that much protein. And the take home is you can definitely get enough protein on a plant-based. This graph shows that. So where do you get your protein? Again, this is my favorite question. So here is a great photo of where we get our protein. Some of the big bangs are going to be your tempeh and your tofu. And yes, you can make these absolutely taste wonderful. It doesn't have to be just a block of white stuff. You can marinate it. You can saute it. You can use tofu as in smoothies. You can use it as ricotta cheese, a lot of different options to make it palatable, more than palatable, excellent. So that's one of my biggest sources of protein are tempeh and tofu. Beans. We know in the blue zones where the pockets of the world where people are living the longest, they eat a ton of beans. So tons of varieties of beans, from chickpeas to kidney beans to black beans to lentils, any kind of bean, wonderful source of protein, and so good for our gut microbiome, being a wonderful source of fiber. But anything, I mean, if you look at, vegetables and fruits, they actually have protein in it. We don't think of them as being protein, but they do have protein. Quinoa is a wonderful grain that is really full of protein. Seitan, which is kind of a gluten containing kind of meat substitute that can be used for meatloafs and things like that, or dark leafy greens, our nuts. And so all of our nut butters, and not your sugary kind of stuff like Jif, but if you get a true nut butter and snacking on walnuts and almonds and cashews, and edamame, which has soy in it, which we'll get to down the road. And then our seeds too. So flax seeds and chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, hemp. These are great sources of omega-3 fatty acids with chia and flax as well. And then our non-dairy milks, particularly like soy milk, has great protein in it. Almond milk, the one that's not fortified with the extra protein, not as much. But if you look at the labels, you will see that certain non-dairy milks do contain protein. So this is a great little graph, and hopefully you guys maybe they'll be able to share slides. This is what I hand out to my patients. I have them take this home, and so I highlight that even their vegetables, even their fruit do have protein in them. Maybe not quite as much as your tofu, tempeh, quinoa, and beans, but you are getting protein, and this all counts. If you make a big, huge, healthy salad and put it on a bed of quinoa and add some tofu on top, you're going to get a lot of protein. So this is a great graphic that I say, this shows where you can get it. And I love this quote. If you haven't seen the documentary, The Game Changers, highly recommend you watch it. It's on Netflix. And this is like the strongest man in the world, like literally, like he moves, like pulls cars by himself. And so this is his quote. Someone asked me, how could you get as strong as an ox without eating any meat? And my answer is, have you ever seen an ox eating meat? And that's so true. I mean, the strongest animals in the world, elephants, these huge animals, they're herbivores. They don't eat meat, and somehow they're able to build muscle and be strong. And Patrick and Serena Williams, the tennis player, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, these are living proof that yes, you can be really powerful and really strong on a plant-based dietary pattern. Moving on, myth number 4, you cannot get all your nutrients on a plant-based. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to break bones. I'm going to be anemic. Where do I get all my nutrients? So calcium. The Dairy Association wants to believe that the only thing that we can get dairy from is cows. And I don't know about anyone else in this room, but my mom is not a cow. So unless your mother is a cow, you don't need dairy. You don't need dairy. And unfortunately, the American Dairy Association has such a strong hold on the financial aspect of this and the lobbyists that probably will always have dairy around in subsidized restaurants and schools and things like that. But the bottom line, you can get enough calcium through plants. Your big hitters are going to be your dark leafy greens. So your broccoli and your bok choy and your collard greens and artichokes and asparagus and Swiss chard, Brussels sprouts, okra, spinach. I want you to eat spinach. Absolutely. It's got antioxidants and so many powerful ingredients or nutrients in it. However, the calcium in spinach is calcium oxalate, so it's not quite readily as absorbable. So if you love spinach salads, make sure you're also mixing in some of these other dark leafy greens. But then we can get calcium through almonds and nuts and avocados and pumpkin seeds and tofu, butternut squash. So definitely can get calcium. If you're really worried, like I'm in my 50s, so I'm that menopausal woman and osteoporosis setting in. So I make sure I have a lot of dark leafy greens and my tofu and my almonds every day, weight-bearing exercise, and I don't drink cow's milk. Haven't had a fracture yet. All right, vegan sources of iron. Where do I get my iron? I think I have to have red meat, right? That's the only place where I can get iron. And no. Where do we get iron? Again, we're going to see dark leafy greens on this list. We're going to see beans such as garbanzo beans and chickpeas and kidney beans and soybeans, lentils, tofu, nuts, even dark chocolate has some iron in it, and our seeds and our peas. And one thing that you want to try to do is, in order to increase the absorption of these iron-containing plants, is it's really good to combine it with some vitamin C rich foods. So maybe if you're having, a salad, you might want to have it with, a side of fruit like berries or kiwi or some oranges, just to get that vitamin C, and that can increase the absorption. And then on the contrary, what do you want to avoid when you're consuming these iron-rich foods? And you want to try to avoid caffeine and alcohol while eating them. And that's good for your body too. So those are some areas where you can get your iron. Okay. One of the biggest myths also I still hear every day is soy, particularly in females. And what is the concern? Breast cancer. So I have to admit, earlier in my career, because before I became enlightened, board certified in lifestyle medicine and plant-based nutrition, I was told this from my attendings, is that soy is bad for you because it contains estrogen, and therefore estrogen can cause breast cancers and hormone-related cancers such as prostate cancer and things like that. And it's completely opposite. The estrogen in soy are actually phytoestrogens, and they bind to a different receptor. They bind to a beta receptor. So it actually blocks and helps prevent these cancers. It almost is like a tamoxifen. So you're getting all this nutritional benefit, including protein, including fiber, and you're preventing cancers. So regular consumption of soy in females can reduce the risk of breast cancer by 30%. And if you've had breast cancer, can reduce the risk of reoccurrence by 30%. So that's incredible. So if you have a family history of breast cancer, if you've had breast cancer yourself, if you don't want to get breast cancer, soy. And in men, we're not going to leave you out. Regular consumption of soy can help decrease the risk of prostate cancer by 30%. So it's also beneficial for our bones because that beta, that binds the beta receptor of the soy is on your bones. So that's going to help strengthen our bones as much as we can. It can help lower our cholesterol levels. It's a great source of protein. It can actually be effective in improving glucose control. So, for our menopausal woman in the audience, including me, Dr. Neil Barnard, who is the physician at the Barnard Medical Center and is head of PCRM, which is the Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine, did an amazing study within the past year called the WAVE study, Women's Alleviation of Vasomotor Symptoms, i.e. hot flashes. 12-week study, and the participants were put on a low-fat, whole-food, plant-based dietary pattern, along with half a cup of soybeans daily. At the end of 12 weeks, the hot flashes decreased by a remarkable 87%. So in all of my women, particularly menopausal women, I am pushing soy, but all my women to prevent breast cancers and get good sources of protein, soy is it. And then calorie density, I have this in my office. I love this slide because it really shows what does 500 calories look like. And you know, what sounds more appealing and more filling, you know, to have like a couple tablespoons of oil that barely fills your tummy, doesn't really satisfy you, doesn't really give you much nutrition, or 500 calories of fruits and vegetables that can really fill your tummy, get you all that fiber, nurture your gut microbiome. And so this is just a good graphic that really, I find, hits home with patients of like, what's the best way to like satisfy me? So when people say, I'm going to be so hungry on a vegan diet, I'm like, well, that tummy looks pretty full on 500 calories versus, you know, 500 calories of just some cheese or oil. Okay, myth number 5, meal prep is difficult. Well, it's not more difficult than preparing omnivore and meat. It's just different. And that's what I try to say, is that it's different. It's maybe different than you're used to, but it's not more difficult. And a great thing to do with plant-based or any kind of cooking is to do batch cooking. So for parents that are busy, people who work during the week, Sunday is a great time to batch cook. Get an Instapot or a crock pot. Put some quinoa in there, make a big portion of quinoa. You can make soups, you can freeze it. I make a tofu scramble every couple of days that have sauteed vegetables and cumin and turmeric, and then I keep it in Tupperwares. Steel cut oats, you can get mason jars and you can do overnight oats. Again, batch cooking, getting containers, and then it's not difficult. It's planning. And I think with plant-based, like any good dietary pattern, it takes planning and shopping and just learning to do something different. You make a stir fry, just don't put the meat in it. You make burritos, put beans in it instead of meat. You make a salad, don't top it with, you know, chicken, top it with beans or tofu or tempeh. So it's just different. It's not more difficult. And for some busy people who feel like they don't even have time to cook, there's some wonderful meal delivery services, plant-based. Some that come to mind are Purple Carrot and Bistro. But if you Google search plant-based delivery options, you will find a lot of them. So that's an option too. And then this is American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Breakey, Gaia, and myself are all members and board certified in lifestyle medicine. They have some wonderful handouts. And so I give this handout to my patients about how to make a Nourish Bowl. And basically it gives you just kind of like, you know, a base of like what your protein can be, what your fiber-rich carbs can be, what some healthy fat options, veggies, leafy greens, toppers, and then, you know, how to combine those to make either a burrito bowl or a Mediterranean bowl, an Asian bowl, a tofu bowl, tahini. So again, it's just kind of educating and getting people to go, oh, wow, that's kind of hard. It's just a little bit different. I can do that. And this is a great vegan shopping list. I have one that's actually 5 pages that I hand out to my patients, and I tell them, go through this list, highlight what you're already doing, highlight what you're willing to try, bring it to the grocery store. So again, people are shocked when I'm like, here's a 5-page grocery store and everything on this is plant-based and green light. And they're like, wow, okay, I thought I just could get lettuce, you know? So it's good to just show a list of what's possible. Myth number 6, plant-based dietary patterns are too risky for kids. Well, Bob Breakey has got some kids and they look pretty darn healthy to me. He raised his kids. My kids, well, one of my daughter's plant-based, my son's getting there. But the answer is yes, it's completely healthy to raise kids on a plant-based dietary pattern. So here's a plate, you know, that we got our fruits and our veggies and our calcium-containing foods that we talked about, and our beans and our seeds and our grains, and then maybe some healthy fats like avocados, maybe a little bit of olive oil, tofu. And again, we don't need our cow's milk, but we can get soy milk or any of the plant-based milk. And again, anyone who's plant-based should take a B12 supplement. This is a wonderful resource. This is one of our lifestyle medicine colleagues, our favorite nutritionist ever, Dr. Brenda Davis. She's written many books, and she partnered with the pediatrician Dr. Rima Shah, to write this beautiful book called Nourish. It's all about the benefits and the safety of raising your family on a plant-based dietary pattern. And it comes with recipes too. So highly recommend if you're raising a family, you're interested in this, to get this book, Nourish. And that's it. So I will hand the microphone over to Bob, but thank you so much. And hopefully now you have some answers for those myths.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Before we give it to Bob, this is Gaia again. I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, Bob Breakey. Dr. Breakey is a graduate from U of M School of Medicine in 1981. He's also board certified through the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. His interest in plant-based eating goes way back. I understand back in the 70s, Bob founded a vegetarian club with a couple of friends from the People's Food Co-op here in town. He's currently is the chair of the Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group, PBNSG. This is a Southeast Michigan organization that's a powerhouse for individuals who are trying to make changes to a more plant-based eating for their health. He's a frequent presenter at PPOD, the Plant-Based Prevention of Disease Medical Conference that happens yearly here in Ypsilanti. And Dr. Breakey is the chairman of Trinity Health IHA Medical Group Governing Board. So he really is at the top of IHA, the health system here in town. And he is also the medical director of the William Folletti Lifestyle Medicine Institute. With that, I'll turn things over to Bob.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to present to the A2ZERO group and really kind of share some of my experience, as Gaia mentioned, over the last 1977. What's that make me? Almost 40 years worth of and studying and working in this field. And I see it every day. I'm in one of my exam rooms now, and I see every day patients who come in and are either kind of hoping for, wishing for health and vitality, and I help empower them to have that ability versus those that have already maintained that. And I'll share a couple stories along the way. But let me see first if I can share my screen and get to our session, Preventing and Reversing Disease Through Plant-Based Nutrition. Can you see my slides okay? Coming through?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So let me back up to the 1960s. I was the oldest of my four brothers, and we grew up in an era when, wow, processed food was all the rage. I mean, we had Aunt Jemima pancakes with sausages, bacon, and butter and syrup for breakfast. We had ham and cheese sandwiches on Wonder Bread. We had always some kind of meat and a glass of milk with dinner. Well, I had a severe form of eczema on my hands, cracks all winter long. My brother had chronic tonsillitis and ear infections, ended up with a tonsillectomy. My next brother had recurrent constipation. And it was later on that I found that all of this was largely preventable had we known a little more, had my mom and our systems and teachers known a little more about how best to nourish the human body from early on. Well, the other thing about the 60s is pretty much everybody smoked. My mom, all of her brothers, and over 43% of adults smoked then, until 1964, when Dr. Luther Terry produced a landmark, the Surgeon General at the time, landmark report on COPD, lung cancer, and smoking. And we learned that these diseases are largely preventable. Well, you can see that the blue is the per capita cigarette consumption among men in the US, and the red is the lung cancer death rates. And with about a 30-year lag, those curves followed pretty close as they went up and up and up. And then as smoking rates fell after Dr. Luther's report, you see again with a 30-year lag, down came the rates of lung cancer in the United States. So you can see that kind of the area under this triangle on this downswing are deaths that were clearly prevented by this simple lifestyle medicine approach to preventing this serious and deadly disease. One of my mom's brothers died of lung cancer, another of heart attack. Actually, two of them died of lung cancer. These were largely preventable through this simple measure. Well, fast forward to 1990, Dr. Dean Ornish published his landmark report on controlled studies showing that our nation's leading killer, coronary artery disease, is not only preventable, but largely reversible through his program of reducing stress, whole food, plant-based nutrition, daily exercise, and social connectedness. This again kind of shook the world a little bit, but medical science barely changed. Fast forward again to 2015, Dr. Michael Greger published his book, How Not to Die, and we learned that all 15 of our leading killers are largely preventable, mostly through whole food, plant-based dietary approach. So Alzheimer's, colon cancer, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, all of these are diseases that are not really diseases at all. They are conditions caused by the lifestyle that people live, largely what they eat. So as a result of this kind of environment we have in the United States, we have some pretty shameful statistics. We spend over $3.2 trillion on healthcare with at best mediocre results. A 2017 report from the Commonwealth Fund showed that we ranked 11 out of 11, in other words, last place of developed countries in their healthcare measures, midlife mortality, cost of care, access, et cetera. And 80% of what we spend on chronic disease are largely preventable and often reversible. So this is a big part of the reason we don't score well. We don't prevent or get to the root cause of diseases. We just manage them when they come on. We know that prevention saves lives. The seatbelt laws came into place in the 80s and 90s, and you can see as seatbelt use went up with the red line, down came fatality rates. So what we really need now is a seatbelt for our forks to be able to say, how can we harness this life-saving information and help people to see that by eating better, they can live longer and with greater vitality. Out of this fundamental paradigm shift is being led by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And both Dr. Sundermann and Gaia mentioned that we are now board certified in lifestyle medicine and promote for our patients these 6 pillars of healthy eating, physical activity, managing stress, sleeping well, avoiding risky substances and addictions, and social connectedness. Together, these hold the power to help us to prevent and reverse the most common chronic diseases I see in my office right here every day. Their vision statement is a world wherein lifestyle medicine is the foundation of a transformed, sustainable system of healthcare. And we mentioned coronary artery disease. Well, the Ornish program got some pretty amazing results here. Their coronary artery patients who were placed on his program noted a 91% decrease in their frequency of angina attacks. That's chest pain due to lack of blood flow to parts of the heart in just a few weeks versus 180% increase in attacks in the control group who were treated with medications and usual care. Once again, this was further augmented by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn's work in 2015, reported in the Journal of Family Practice, and his book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And this kind of famous picture of the coronary artery from a 43-year-old Cleveland Clinic surgeon, where on the left you see a raggedy, narrowing, clogging of the main artery going down the front of his heart called the left anterior descending. And then 3 years later on his program of whole food plant-based eating, back to gone. We didn't even think this was possible when I was in medical school. Once you get calcified plaque in the arteries, we thought, well, that's it. It's stuck there. And we now know that when you start eating a healthy diet, not smoking, some daily exercise, managing stress, you can reverse that and help to change the trajectory of people destined for repeat heart attacks, strokes, and other vascular disease. In fact, Dr. Esselstyn has famously said that coronary artery disease is a benign foodborne illness that need never exist or progress. This is what his studies have shown. So now that tobacco is on the decline, it used to be in 1993, the leading killer. In 2018, also reported in the Journal of American Medical Association, dietary risk has now surpassed that. Our diets have become worse, tobacco is less, and we now face a new form of chronic disease burden as a result of the continued American diet. To help see where and how we can improve on this, I divide foods into 4 categories: unprocessed on the top and processed on the bottom, animal left and plant on the right. So you get the idea. Down here are your processed animal foods. Up here, at least it looks more similar to the way nature presented it. Down here, processed plant foods that really bear little resemblance to the way nature presented them to us and are often have a lot of added fat, salt, and sugar. And then up here, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans, which are the unprocessed plant foods. So how do we decide then what makes a food health supporting and which of these quadrants we should aim for? Well, on the lower half here, these processed foods, I think it's pretty clear. And with this group, we don't need to spend a lot of time to know that these are not really foods at all. They lead to obesity, cancer, heart disease. And the real question most people then have is, well, what about the top part? Should we be more plant-forward, plant-based, or should we be omnivorous? As Melissa covered in detail, a lot of myths about what that means, but let's go into a little more detail about the why for these components. And if you look at desirable characteristics for what makes a food health supporting, they're rich in antioxidants, high in dietary fiber, they're alkalinizing, free of cholesterol, anti-inflammatory, rich in phytonutrients, and with a balanced set of macronutrients. Let's go through each of these and kind of compare the two so we have a good table to fill in. The study was done and reported in 2010 on the antioxidant content of more than 31 different 100 foods. These were everything from lentils and broccoli to hamburgers and bacon. And you don't need to look at all the details to see that the average antioxidant content for plant-based foods was over 1,100 units versus only 18 for your animal foods, maximum 289,000 versus 100. The plants need these antioxidants. They make them in order to survive the firestorm of photosynthesis. And if animals eat those plants, they use them to put out the firestorm of oxidative phosphorylation and extracting energy from food. So the bottom line is these unpaired molecules that are called free radicals go around like a bull in a china shop, creating DNA damage, mutations, and cancer, denaturing proteins, setting up immune response and chronic inflammation. They create endothelial damage, leading to heart attacks and strokes, and cellular damage, leading to cellular aging and organ dysfunction around the body. So it's important anytime you have calories to have the fire extinguisher antioxidants to go with it. And these come from the plant foods. So we'll put a big 5-star here and a big X in the animal foods for minimal or none. Egg beaters actually has the distinguished amount of being high in calories. And although people think of it as a healthy, cholesterol-free form of eggs, it has 0 antioxidants. It's mostly made from egg whites. Next is fiber. I tell people you're not just you're you and over 38 trillion microorganisms that mostly inhabit your colon, and you work together synergistically. You feed your microbiome well, and they'll support immune function, hormone balance, they manage toxins that come from the environment and your food. They nourish your colon with what's called short-chain fatty acids, lower inflammation there and throughout your body, produce nutrients for you that can then be reabsorbed along your intestine, signal satiety to your brain. So by eating fiber is the best way to help manage weight concerns. And Melissa showed that nice slide from Forks Over Knives about calorie density. It's largely the fiber and water content that make plant foods so nutrient dense, but not so calorie dense. And then they actually aid in nutrient absorption for several nutrients. In contrast, if you starve them, they actually cause inflammation for your colon, the imbalance and decreased diversity, produce toxins. They increase the reabsorption of estrogen in your system, increase serum cholesterol, induce inflammation both in the colon and throughout the body. And the colonic inflammation leads to gaps between the little junctions of the colon cells or leaky gut, causing substances to leak across and increasing the risk for autoimmune disease. So what do they eat? Fiber. The average American only gets, by the way, this is the part from plant cell walls that's left over after we extract what we want. And then the rest goes to feed our microbiome. These include soluble and insoluble fiber, resistant starches, and really 1,000 different types of fiber in different foods. The average American only gets about 15 grams of fiber a day. Our dietary guidelines say we should get at least 30. It turns out even this is a paltry low. When you look at areas of the world of the blue zones or what our ancestors ate, it was more like 60 to 100 plus grams of fiber a day. Sad news is that only 3% of Americans even meet the 30-gram goal. So this is our most severe nutrient deficiency that we face in America, and the consequences are dire. Fiber occurs only in whole plant foods, not the processed. You see a little bit in white bread, and then none in olive oil, white sugar, or any animal foods, because they either have it processed out or, in case of animals, never had it in the first place. So if you're looking to meet that minimum of 30 to 40 grams a day, you've got to focus on the whole plant foods and eliminate or at least greatly minimize the others on the left. These foods then on the top lead to starvation for your microbiome, and on the bottom, the nourishment that gives you all the benefits we talked about. We see this in population studies as the number of grams of fiber in the day goes up from 15 to 60, and it appears that it continues to improve even from there. Down goes the risk of heart disease, breast cancer, and diabetes. It's not just the fiber that's causing this, it's that the fiber is a marker for whole plant foods that have all the benefits to help reduce the incidence and severity of these diseases. So let's put a big 5-star on plant foods and a big X on animal, which have 0. Next is alkaline. Acid load to the kidneys is largely determined by 2 amino acids in the protein part of food called cysteine and methionine. These contain sulfur, and they're very high in animal muscle, especially those that are higher in protein, like fish, pork, and poultry. Now, why is this important? As Melissa mentioned, in order to balance the pH of the blood, the kidneys are tasked with excreting all that extra acid. In the short run, they produce ammonia to protect themselves from that. And in the long run, although that's protective in the short run, that leads to toxicity of the delicate tubules in the kidney, increasing the risk for chronic kidney disease. This acid imbalance in the body too throws off many other important chemical equations. You can see we can partially offset that by eating lots of fruits, veggies, and beans, which are alkalinizing, but the best way is to just eliminate or greatly minimize the animal foods on the left to get a more alkaline balance. And we get the 5-star here and the negative on animal. Next is cholesterol. You find cholesterol only in animal foods, not in any plant-based foods. And your average blood levels of cholesterols should be less than 150 if you're looking to be like areas of the world, like rural China or Africa, where heart disease simply doesn't exist. American average of 200 means that heart disease is ubiquitous. Virtually all Americans have this disease by the age of 10. And if you look at cholesterol, serum cholesterol levels in rural China, they range from 80 to 160. Ours start about that range with the lowest levels for most Americans at 160 and going up to over 290 with an average of 215. And if you look at it, the risk of coronary artery disease in rural China is approximately 0. You just don't see coronary care units, heart attacks, or other. Same with Rwanda, Africa, and many other areas of the world where they eat whole food plant-based diet, versus pretty much 100% in the United States. Now, everybody doesn't get a clinically significant heart attack, but the clogging of the arteries still is present if you look at it on autopsy studies or on cardiac scans. So cholesterol-free and plant foods, 100% cholesterol-free. The animal foods, especially the fatty part of them, are a rich source of this non-nutrient, which pulls people down. Next is anti-inflammatory, and this is very important because inflammation is the root cause of many of the chronic diseases I see. Plant foods, we've already talked about, are rich in antioxidants. They support a healthy microbiome, and we'll come back to phytonutrient-rich in a minute. In contrast, animal foods contain bacterial endotoxins. For example, the average quarter pounder has 100 million bacteria, and pretty much all animal foods have bacteria from the slaughterhouse. And most of these die in cooking, but not before they form what are called endotoxins that survive cooking, stomach acid, and digestive enzymes. The saturated fats help shuttle these across the intestine, and they create inflammation throughout the body, accelerating atherosclerosis, insulin resistance, and setting people up for heart disease and diabetes. The next is arachidonic acid. This is a substance our own bodies use to create inflammation when we need it. You step on a nail or get a scrape or a splinter, you need arachidonic acid to call out the troops, bring in white blood flow, start the healing process. And plants don't have it, but other animals do, especially if you're a stressed chicken in a warehouse of 100,000 others, or 5 to an 18 by 18 cage. And that stress substance, that inflammation substance, goes into the meat and eggs. And every bite of chicken, every bite of egg is like eating inflammation message that goes throughout the body. Others too, red meats, burgers, especially processed meats, are a source of arachidonic acid that creates inflammation throughout the body. The next is heme iron. We used to think this was the beneficial way to get iron, but as Melissa mentioned, you can easily get iron from plant-based foods, and you should avoid this type of iron because it's actually a pro-oxidant. It creates free radicals and inflammation throughout the body. It's not hard to see that you link heme iron intake with each 1 milligram with significant increases in these common diseases. And it's not hard to get a milligram in a 3-ounce portion of many of these shellfish. You have sometimes double digits in clams, but even red meats, 2 to 3 milligrams can increase these risks that I mentioned here several fold. So avoid heme iron where possible. Next is carnitine in meat or choline in eggs, which metabolizes by the bacteria of people who eat these foods to a substance called trimethylamine. This is oxidized in the liver to trimethylamine oxide. Again, bad actor. You can measure TMAO levels going up in the bloodstream after an Egg McMuffin meal, and also look at the effects and stiffening of the arteries as it courses throughout the system. Here it is from an article from the New England Journal with the meat, dairy, and eggs going in the front door over here, and then a heart attack, stroke, and death coming out the back door over here. So the bottom line is this foodborne inflammation. We're familiar with foodborne illness with Salmonella, E. coli, the Shigella, Giardia that contaminate foods, but we don't so much think that these animal foods are bringing foodborne inflammation, which makes all of these diseases much more greater risk, and much more prevalent in the societies where people eat them. So let's put a big anti-inflammatory for plant and pro-inflammatory for animals. Next is phytonutrients. Plants contain over 30,000, maybe as many as 100,000. We're discovering new ones every day of substances that are well beyond vitamins and minerals and macronutrients, but these substances are not optional. Bioflavonoids in citrus, lycopene in tomatoes, phytates in beans, etc., help us to decrease inflammation, support immune function, and help all the systems of our body to function more effectively. By definition, phyto means plant, so these are prevalent in plants, and you guessed it, little or none in animal foods. And finally, balanced macronutrients. If you look at areas of the world like the blue zones where people live longest and most disease-free, their diets are about 80% complex carbs, not the carbs that come from sugar and white bread and such, but from lentils, broccoli, and whole grains, and about 10% fat, 10% protein. You can see right away that the animal foods are way unbalanced with no complex carbs and fat and protein. But it's even more important than that, as Melissa covered well, the question of where do you get your protein is really a no-brainer, because all of these foods are rich sources of protein. And all you really need is, as we said, 5 to 10% of your calories from protein. So if you're eating whole, real foods, meeting your calorie needs, you're easily meeting your protein needs. It's even more important than that, though. We talked about how the animal proteins are more acidic because of the sulfur-containing amino acids. They're more allergenic, especially dairy and eggs are the 2 leading causes of food allergy. They're pro-inflammatory for all the reasons we talked about. And they stimulate a substance called IGF-1, which is a growth hormone in our systems that fan the flame of cancer. This substance says grow, divide, multiply, spread. And when you're a baby drinking mother's milk and getting animal protein at the time of life when you're supposed to, that growth hormone is beneficial. Later in life, it dramatically increases risk of cancer. So we used to think that animal fat was the source of all evil, and ding, industry to the rescue. We had skim milk, low-fat this, fat-free ballpark franks, egg beaters, fat-free Hellmann's. Not sure how you even do some of that and still call it food. But then we realized that the animal protein also significantly increases risk of several cancers, osteoporosis, chronic kidney disease, and independently increases serum cholesterol, so it contributes to all this as well. So all the while, we thought we were doing good by lowering protein, switching from red meat to fish, and decreasing your fat and your cheese. And all the while, we were not doing ourselves any favors. In fact, in this study of middle-aged folks, those on a higher protein intake had 75% increase in overall mortality, a 400% increase in cancer death over the following 18 years, and these effects were abolished or attenuated if the proteins were plant-derived. So it's not just where do you get your protein because you want to make sure to get enough, it's where do you get your protein so that you have healthy protein that is health-supporting, and the answer, of course, is the plants. The same with fats. Animal are the source of cholesterol. They're much more saturated fats. They have naturally containing trans fats, which are the ones the FDA banned because they were causally linked in a definitive manner to cancer and heart disease, but they still naturally occur in animal foods, and they're very high in heavy metals and contaminants. So the fats are important too. You want to get those from naturally occurring fats and plant sources from whole plant foods and avoid the animal. And finally, carbs. Most animal foods, meat and eggs, have none. Milk has sugar in the form of lactose, which metabolizes to galactose, a very poor sugar. Milk lactose is poorly digested in the first place. Most people get sick right away from it. The majority of the world's population, I should say, not most Caucasians, but most people in the world get sick right away from lactose. Because why would you need to digest milk sugar after infancy? It's just completely unnatural. So you see the pattern here too. Plant foods are very balanced, healthy set of macronutrients versus the opposite in animal. So are we noticing a pattern here? Is this just a coincidence that plant foods are rich in the nutrients we need, that they're health supporting, and animal foods are the opposite or health degrading? No, this is the kind of foods we evolved on. Our ancestors were 97 to 98% plant-based in their eating and no processed food. So the whole food plant-based is a natural way for people to eat, and it results in optimal health outcomes. So our new 4 food groups, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans with some scattering of nuts and seeds, becomes the cornerstone of what helps us to stay healthy. And this is from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, the whole food plant-based plate with nuts and legumes on the plant proteins, whole grains, and of course, half fruits and vegetables with drinking water on the side. This is a good handout I use with my patients to help them to see that you too can do this. One other thing before we leave, and that's that many animal foods are also contaminated, fish with mercury and heavy metals. And in the case of milk and even red meat, we have now found that the majority of cows in the United States are infected with bovine leukemia virus in their mammary glands that produce the milk. In fact, it's only the smaller farms that have the mass majority with large farms, 100% were found to be positive for bovine leukemia virus. Well, why is this important? Because if it's a bovine virus that causes leukemia in cows, maybe it's okay for humans. That's what we thought until this study came out in 2015, which looked at the cancer cells of breast tissue removed from breasts, and the DNA from the bovine leukemia virus was stitched into these cancer cells. We know that viruses can cause many cancers, Kaposi sarcoma in the case of AIDS, cervical cancer in the case of HPV, human papillomavirus. And we now have strong evidence that this virus also significantly increases the risk of breast cancer and may be responsible for as many as 37% of breast cancers, which is millions of women every year. We really have to get this information out there. So what does all this mean for people with an interest in optimal health? Well, our per capita chicken increase has gone up and up and up as people replace red meat with this. And chickens have also been obesified. They are 4 times the size and get them to market in half the time. So the high fat, fiber deficient chicken is leading to increased risk of many diseases. Same with cheese. Used to be 5 or 10 pounds a year when I was born, and now over 33 pounds a year with pizza, cheese, and everything. And look at this graph for US adults with diabetes. Now, correlation doesn't always imply causation, but now that we know the mechanism for insulin resistance, the root cause of diabetes, we know that this is causally related, that all this extra saturated fat burden is what's interfering with the insulin signaling process and bringing this disease to epidemic levels in our country. So key take-home point here, chicken and cheese are key drivers of our diabetes epidemic and all the downstream harms that it causes. Dr. Barnard's book, Reversing Diabetes, is an excellent handbook for anybody looking to prevent or reverse diabetes, for that matter, with a whole food plant-based approach. Finally, people ask, how plant-based do I need to be to get the benefits? And it really is a continuum. If you look at the standard American diet, it's only 11% of the calories from whole food plant-based. And we'll put that over here, label it SAD for standard American diet. And if you look instead at the Power Plate, Dr. Barnard's group's book, you see over 95% plus. Now, there's a lot in between, but what we see is the red zones here are where you're inciting and accelerating disease. Later, slower progression for the orange. By the time you get up to 95, you can begin to mitigate. And this is where the USDA, DASH, Mediterranean, Pritikin are like a continuum. And the risk of chronic disease goes down as your percent whole food plant-based goes up. So we can see this in population studies, in the Evidence Health Study, where they have similar lifestyles, except for some have meat, some have pesco-vegetarian, some are vegetarian, some vegan. So the body mass index, only the vegans were in a normal weight range. Same with diabetes prevalence. And the general principles are here that it's not all or nothing. There's no threshold effect. The more you do, the greater your gain. The earlier you start, the better. It's best in childhood, but it's never too late to gain the benefits from a whole food plant-based approach. So they're rich in antioxidants, supporting fiber, anti-inflammatory, and balanced micronutrients. And that's what leads to this tree as a metaphor. If you look at a tree on the left growing in healthy soil, where the soil is rich, moist, loaded with nutrients, the tree is going to go rich and full. On the other side, compacted, dry, lack of nutrients, not so much. Well, you see the analogy here over on the left, people following a whole food plant-based lifestyle with some daily exercise, managing stress and social connected, have systems that are rich in antioxidants, a healthy microbiome, a lot of phytonutrients, balanced macronutrients, leading to strong blood flow and low inflammation and healthy organs, and then finally vitality, wellness, independence, and freedom. Meanwhile, on the right side here, our heavy processed animal food, sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress diet leads to oxidative stress, imbalance in the microbiome, ischemia, slow blood flow to your tissues, and inflammation leading to organ dysfunction, insulin resistance, diabetes, heart disease, chronic pain, depression, strokes, Alzheimer's, and most of the common diseases I see in my office every day. So be the tree on the left. You can, you can do this and enjoy the benefits. Before we end, I just want to mention a couple other things. A big part of the A2ZERO marker is to save not only people, but the earth. Without a habitable biosphere, none of the rest of this matters. And eating whole food plant-based every day saves 1,100 gallons of fresh water, 45 pounds of grain instead of feeding it to animals, 30 square feet of Amazon forest. This is per person per day, and 10 pounds of carbon dioxide and one animal's life. On that last piece too, people see this on the grill, but forget that it comes from sentient beings who have the capacity to care for the young and feel and pain and suffering. And we have to think too that we share this world with these remarkable creatures, and whole food plant-based lifestyle also means no cruelty on your plate and support for others who are our kindred spirits. Additional resources, Forks Over Knives is a great video, and you can either take a screenshot or a picture of this piece, or we'll come back to it if you like. Great organizations. Dr. Michael Greger, I mentioned his book, How Not to Die, the best I've seen in studying this for 40 years. And his website, nutritionfacts.org, everything free, great set of resources. And Melissa mentioned, Gaia mentioned the plant-based nutrition support group. With great resources, cooking classes, support groups, and amazing speakers. And then finally, Rochester Lifestyle Medicine, who have a great thing going over in New York, sponsored by Dr. Ted Barnett. And you go to their website for more information. So bottom line, eat as if your health and your life depend on it, because they do. And when you have your health, you have 1,000 dreams. When you don't, you have just one. So this is my wife and I in Sedona. We love to travel and be active and vital even well into our 60s, and invite you all to join us on this journey of health and vitality through plant-based nutrition. Let me push the stop share now and see if we've developed any questions.
Well, I really want to thank both of our speakers so much for these wonderful presentations. Informative, and I'm well informed, but I learned things even with these presentations. So thank you both so much. Round of applause, as they say. And it looks like Melissa, it looks like you answered a lot of the questions.
Yeah, I think I got through all of the questions that came in the queue during Bob's presentation. So hopefully those were all addressed. And, you know, there was a question about someone had to join late. So I think there is going to be a recording available. And I am, you know, feel free to share my slides because maybe people want some of those handouts for their own use.
I'm wondering if there were questions that you answered to the individual that were good general questions that you might you know, just one or two questions that you might want to share with the
Yeah,
whole.
well, here's a couple that just came up. What about mushrooms and fungi in our diet? Absolutely. You know, obviously the fiber in them, but there's really some good medicinal properties with mushrooms of BDNF, so brain-derived neurotropic factors, so actually good for our brains. There's anti-inflammatory, immunity, there can be cancer-fighting properties, and mushrooms are one of the only living organisms, we are one of them as humans, that can generate vitamin D. We know that vitamin D, when we're outside and the sunlight, the UV light is on our skin, we're able to convert and I don't want to say manufacture, but basically get vitamin D. But mushrooms, if you put them into the UV light, they can also generate vitamin D. So they are wonderful vegetables to put into your diet, and they have a lot of medicinal properties as well. And then, can you reverse or improve osteoarthritis? Absolutely. We spoke about the gut microbiome, both Dr. Breakey and myself did. 70% of our immune system resides in the gut microbiome. That's about 30 trillion organisms. So we actually are the host of our gut microbiome. There's more organisms in our gut microbiome between bacteria and fungi and viruses than there are cells in our genome. So 70% of our immune system. So this means inflammation. So this means joint pain. This means diabetes. This means coronary artery disease. This means dementia. So by nurturing your gut microbiome, and the only way to nurture it is fiber in the diet, which are prebiotics. And what Dr. Breakey said is anytime we eat something with fiber, remembering that fiber is only found in fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains. Every time you have a piece of cheese, an egg, chicken, fish, there's absolutely no fiber in that. So when you consume the fiber as a prebiotic, the gut microbiome, we're now basically generating short chain fatty acids. Those go all over our body and do wonderful things. And one of them is improving our osteoarthritis. I'll give an example for my husband. We're in our 50s. He played soccer for University of Michigan, 3 ACL surgeries, chronic knee pain. Had to take Advil every single day. Went whole food plant-based completely, not as long as Dr. Breakey, but about 4 years ago. And his knee pain has really resolved. No longer has to take ibuprofen. So absolutely can improve osteoarthritis. If you're already bone on bone, I'm not so sure that can improve x-ray wise, but I think in terms of inflammation, absolutely can improve.
Thank
I
you.
would agree with that. I've seen a lot of cases of people who go plant-based because they, got prediabetes. They had a first heart attack, and they said, "Hey, and my arthritis got better too. Is that supposed to happen?" Like, absolutely. Back in medical school, they taught us that there was the inflammatory arthritis like rheumatoid, lupus, and others that were autoimmune, and the wear and tear arthritis that were simply a matter of aging. And we now know that's wrong. They're both inflammatory arthritis. One is a more body attacking inflammation, and the other is the more chronic inflammation I referred to from microbiome dysbiosis, from heme iron, from arachidonic acid, from bacterial endotoxins and TMAO that slowly eat away at this cartilage. And because it doesn't have a lot of blood flow, it can't protect or regenerate itself very easily. So like many things, the sooner you start, the more prevent it, because once it's totally lost, it's hard to bring that cartilage back. But you can definitely improve the underlying inflammation, the symptoms, with whole food plant-based nutrition and daily exercise.
And I think there was a question in the queue also about inflammatory bowel disease, such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And there's, sort of myths out there that if you have Crohn's, gosh, you better stay away from fiber. That could be really triggering, vegetables. And the opposite is quite true, that plant-based dietary patterns can actually really improve inflammatory bowel diseases such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Good GI specialist to follow, Dr. Alan Desmond, who's from the UK area, and in this country, Dr. Will Bolsiewicz, who is from North Carolina. Dr. Will Bolsiewicz wrote the wonderful book Fiber Fueled that Bob and I both love. So that's where you can learn more about more GI specific improvements. And I'm going to piggyback on you with Bob. We see a lot of back pain and a lot of degenerative disc disease, and so when we get people with chronic back disease, it's horrific, right? Because injections or they have surgery, and a lot of times these are really debilitating, chronic. It changes your activities of daily life and livelihood. And if you think about vasculature, right? So if you're having an inflammatory diet and it's really clogging up your arteries in your heart and your peripheral arteries, well, there's actually blood supply that goes to those discs in between all of your spine. When you talk about herniated discs, that's where those discs are. So going more plant-based, reducing the inflammation in your body can actually get the blood flow to those discs better and can maybe even improve that chronic back pain. So I think any area of the body. We're now finding more and more how plant-based dietary patterns with their fiber-rich phytonutrients, antioxidants can really be beneficial.
I want to remind our participant audience that you can ask questions by pushing the raise hand button or by entering them into the Q&A section. But I also wanted to follow up while we're talking about other things in plant-based. Dr. Breakey, you said in childhood you had this eczema. How does a plant-based diet help that?
Yeah, good question. Eczema is a continuum of autoimmune concerns. And again, I got little peely fingers all winter long, cracks between the edge, little blisters along the sides, a form called dyshydrotic eczema. And it turns out many autoimmune diseases are actually from systemic inflammation throughout the body. The most important things I mentioned, food allergies are dairy and eggs. Between these seem to increase the risk of many autoimmune diseases, including rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Sjogren's syndrome, eczema, asthma, and even good evidence for type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis. So these are diseases where the body misrecognizes its own self as foreign and attacks it with the immune system. We have to have a strong immune system or we wouldn't survive a day with the onslaught of microorganisms that we're exposed to. So when it turns against itself, things can be pretty devastating. So in my case, by giving up the pro-inflammatory animal foods, increasing my fiber, vegetable intake, the eczema is gone. It's been gone since I went to kind of plant-based in the late 70s. I had it for over 12 years as a kid and into college. And what I am left, though, is you probably can't see, but I've got no fingerprints because they just kept giving me stronger and stronger steroids to put on my hands and then occlusive plastic gloves to wear at night. This causes thinning of the skin. And now the least paper cut can keep my hands from their fragile state. So I'm fortunate to have discovered that. I like to be able to share with my patients that these conditions that are commonly just treated with suppressive steroids or medications can commonly be either greatly improved or reversed. The kind of queen of autoimmune disease reversal is Dr. Brooke Goldner out of Texas. If you look up her website, goodbyelupus.com, and her book, Goodbye Lupus, and her second book, Goodbye Autoimmune Disease. So anybody with either an interest or concern about that, look up Dr. Brooke Goldner's work, and you'll see her amazing story of reversing her own lupus that she got at age 16 and going on now to help to teach the world that there's a better way to approach these kind of diseases.
And then we have a colleague too, Dr. Sarai Stanzik, who was able to reverse or put into remission multiple sclerosis. So some of these disease states that we have patients who are on very, very expensive injectables, immunosuppressant medications, and there might be a better way. And it might be, through food as medicine and a plant-based dietary pattern. So we have colleagues that have reversed, put into remission their own autoimmune diseases, including lupus and multiple sclerosis, which can be horrible lifelong diseases.
Yeah, one of my patients, Colleen, said I could share her story, and she had multiple sclerosis, was waking up tired every day on a medication called Rebif that was $70,000 a year. I inspired her to continue to focus on nutrition, and she finally went to her neurologist and said, I'm feeling better about this. I want to stop my medicine. And they argued with her and said, no, you don't want to end up in a wheelchair. And she said, well, I'm going to try it. And with my support, she did. She's now 4 years later, has no symptoms of MS. Instead of waking up, hitting the snooze alarm 4 times and the side effect and the expense of these medications, she feels better than ever as she goes forward. So a lot of these things that, again, in med school, we learned were just chronic progressive diseases without a known cure or cause are now being laid straight at the feet of the standard American diet and lifestyle. good news for those who want to kind of get past what you hear in the standard media from lobbyists and food pharmaceutical companies to be able to say, hey, there is a better way. You should explore it.
Do we have any questions coming in?
I don't see any raised hands, and we don't have
No.
any more in the Q&A function. So,
All right, I have a couple of questions that maybe one for Bob and one for Melissa. Bob, you talked about processed versus unprocessed and plant-based versus animal-based. What about the comparison unprocessed meat to processed plants such as the Impossible Burger or something like that?
Yeah, great question. Clearly, the worst of the worst is that lower left quadrant of processed meats, which were definitively linked with cancer by the World Health Organization and studying over 800 studies. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes are all legacies of eating that. The other two are kind of somewhere in between the plant-based and animal versus processed plant foods. And when people ask me that, it's kind of Nathan Pritikin, they asked him one time, what's better, margarine or butter? And he said, well, that's like asking me whether I'd like to be shot or hanged. I pick neither. So they're both health degrading. And it's hard to put a percent or a number on which is worse. In general, the animal foods being higher in saturated fats and pro-inflammatory components are at greater risk for cancer, for chronic kidney disease, heart disease, and diabetes. In general, the processed plant foods laden with fat, salt, and sugar also correlated with diabetes, tooth decay, obesity, and all the problems that it portrays, including cancer. So it really is kind of hard to answer. In particular, your processed plant foods like Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger are 6 to 8 grams of saturated fat and 16 to 18 grams of total fat. So in order to make something plant-based taste like the real thing, they load it up with saturated fat, salt, and protein. It is incrementally better than the animal foods because it doesn't contain as many of the pro-inflammatory parts of animal protein, the environmental contaminants and the bacterial endotoxins, but it's not a health food. So I tell people if you need that for a transition food because you want to kind of make progress, it can be, but don't get stuck there. Keep going to the whole food plant-based approach and find great burgers that are made from lentils and oats and soy and broccoli. There's a great source of plant burgers that are healthy and made from real food.
Great, thank you. And Melissa, my question for you, you mentioned near the end the importance of B12. And so how much can you get it from plants? If you're eating some dairy or a little bit of meat, how much, at what point do you have to worry about B12 on the continuum?
So really, I think as we get older, and I say older, probably age 45 and up, all of us should be consuming a B12 supplement, particularly if you are whole food, plant-based, vegetarian. Yes, you do. Where does B12 come from? It doesn't get manufactured by the animal. What happens is when the animals are grazing, eating the grass from the soil, there is bacteria in the soil that produces B12. So as the grazing animals are grazing and eating, they end up eating that, getting some soil, and then the B12 gets absorbed and then gets deposited in the meat. That's how omnivores get their B12. So what are the requirements? Well, the actual requirement is only like 2.4 micrograms, which is like minuscule. Now, if you get a B12 supplement, there's methylcobalamin and cyanocobalamin. Bob, I think you would agree, one camp says methylcobalamin is better, the other one says cyano, basically a B12 supplement. And anything you buy is going to have more than enough. It's going to have like 500 micrograms, 1,000 micrograms. If you're a person that, can't remember to take a supplement every day, that's okay. I mean, because you're going to get 1,000 micrograms, take it 3 times a week. But yes, it is very important. And as we age, even if, my parents do eat some fish, I still say, hey, you take a vitamin B12 supplement. So that is, we do as plant-based dietary patterns, take a B12 supplement. And then I would recommend vitamin D as well. In the summertime, we're outside a lot, we see the sun, but we all wear sunscreen nowadays. So vitamin D is very important. It's almost like a hormone. I do recommend, as we're heading back into shorter days, we're not out as much, probably about 2,000 international units of vitamin D3. So those are the 2 supplements. There was a question in the queue about omega-3, whether we need to supplement with that. Again, you're going to find these camps that half of lifestyle medicine pioneers say yes, and others say no. Remember, you can get omega-3s through ground flaxseed, ground chia seed. So if you're sprinkling that on your salads or your food or in your smoothies, you are getting omega-3s. If you want to take a supplement, be sure to get an algae-based. You don't need to do the fish oil, but get an algae-based omega-3. So it's up to you if you want to take it, absolutely. But know that you can get the omega-3s through those ground seeds as well.
Great. Well, we're coming up to 8:30, and we promised that this would be an hour and a half, so our timing is perfect. I want to again thank our 2 presenters and thank everyone who showed up today, and hopefully we all learned a lot. Don't forget, we have more things coming in the week. There's presentations on plant-based on a budget tomorrow, and then the pizza party on Friday, and then presentation by VegMichigan with a panel at the library on Saturday, and that'll round out the week. So again, thanks to everyone for participating, and thanks to our wonderful speakers.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
See everyone tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for organizing this.